Hello and welcome to The Hash for Thursday, June 24th. I'm Zack Seward. Hi, how you doing? We got Naomi, Brockwell, Will Foxley, Jen Sanasie, and Ben Powers with us today. We're going to start the show off with Ben. Ben, what's the first story of the day?
So some sad news happened yesterday. John McAfee, the sort of tech mogul turned crypto booster, was found dead in his jail cell outside of Barcelona yesterday. And there's really a lot to say here, but also just like taking a moment to kind of let that sink in. He was going to be extradited, and the extradition order was approved yesterday morning to extradite him back to the U.S. to face charges of tax fraud. And some of that, most of that actually was related to his work in crypto. So there's a interesting legacy left here. This was a enigmatic man, let's say, but this was, flying around the internet yesterday. It's sort of an end of a chapter here. And Zack, you and I were working on this story and got it out. So I want to toss this to you for maybe some initial thoughts and some maybe more context.
Yeah, just a truly shocking development yesterday. Really went from a strange story to a tragic story in short order over the course of yesterday. We had a couple hits on this man out the door, and then this development came as first reported by some Spanish papers. Was really quite shocking. I mean, McAfee has always been sort of one of these larger than life, very controversial crypto figures. One of the true early wild boys who was attracted to the cryptocurrency space, and was necessarily a controversial figure, right? He was ensnarled in trouble for promoting various crypto tokens over the years, and sort of led to the trouble that he found himself in later in life. I'm going to throw this to you, Naomi, because I think you probably have the biggest sort of like historical scope here. What does McAfee represent to the space, and what does it mean that he met his end this way so tragically?
Well, I think it's just absolutely a tragic story, and really a disgusting story as well if you look at it from the US extradition perspective. McAfee was actually a friend, so it's a very sad show today. I think that Snowden really encapsulated my feelings the best in his tweet. He said that Europe should not extradite those accused of non-violent crimes to a court system so unfair and prison system so cruel that native-born defendants would rather die than become subject to it. Julian Assange could be next. Until the system is reformed, a moratorium should remain. I agree with this 100%. A UK judge found in January that extradition to the US for Julian Assange would be basically like a death sentence, so they denied it. The DOJ has since appealed the decision, but it's a really sad state of affairs when you have the US government going after people for, they just going after money, and people would rather die than face the system. It's that should really tell us something about how our system works, and maybe should speed up the process to create reform in this system. Ross Ulbricht gave a fantastic presentation at Bitcoin Miami this year, where he talked about the desperate reform needed, all the non-violent people behind bars who should not be there. And this is it should be a priority for us to change this system.
Yeah, and I think maybe to that point, Naomi, McAfee gave an interview last November where he said, life in Spanish prison is like living in a Hilton compared to the surreal, submissive, and dehumanizing conditions of American prison. So he was kind of also pointing to that contrast. And so prison sources told CoinDesk, actually, that there's going to be an autopsy. An investigation has been opened, and that his cellmate was not in the cell at the time that he was found dead. So there's going to be a lot of kind of questions and further investigations. Furthermore, the DOJ declined to comment on this, despite being kind of the ones behind the indictment and pushing for this extradition, and referred CoinDesk to Spanish authorities. So this is something we're going to be continuing to watch, but I do think that it is a real sort of, again, kind of closing of a chapter of this person who was heavily involved in crypto in a variety of different ways. But Jen, I also want to get your thoughts here.
Yeah, just really tragic news to come out yesterday. I think I echo a lot of the feelings that you have all kind of expressed already. It's just like really sad when you think about McAfee sitting in a prison cell and feeling that death is the only option. I hope that what comes out of this, though, is that we can start looking at prison reform in the States and looking at how we can change the system so that this doesn't continue to happen. Unfortunately, as we've spoken about so many times on the show before, these systems are so slow moving and hard to change that I don't see a lot of light at the end of the tunnel, but it's kind of my gloomy take. Will, I'm going to pass it off to you.
Yeah, definitely a story of conflicts here. Just like overall, very sad ending to his life, and like someone who was just like very deep involved in the crypto space. So condolences to him and his family. And then kind of pointing back to what Zack said, he's definitely like a controversial figure because he was known for promoting a lot of scams and ICOs that definitely hurt people in some instances. So it's just like there's a lot of good and bad here. Overall, just like echoing what you guys have to say about prison reform as well.
Yeah, and I think that's, maybe sort of, again, it's indicative of kind of crypto writ large in some ways. Like there is a lot of good and there is a lot of controversial stuff. And this sort of, he encapsulated a lot of that in different ways. But Naomi, I'll toss this to you. You had your hand up.
Yeah, I will just say maybe it might be nice to just have a moment to recognize what McAfee did for the space and the good side, because he kind of came back into the limelight with his presidential campaign, 2016. And that was actually where I first met him, because we did a libertarian debate on the Stossel show at the time. He's just like this crazy, larger than life figure, as you said, Zack, and then I had the good fortune to kind of travel through Europe with him at conferences. I have great memories of like being in the back of this bus going through Bucharest with like the likes of Brock Pierce, Jason King, and Craig Sellers, like all these fantastic people. And McAfee just really was this life force. And I think what he did was, he really encouraged people to join his fight for freedom. He felt so strongly that the government had so much overreach, and he felt that he could push back against that. Of course, he did it in the most wild and crazy ways. Like probably the most recognizable photo of him is him like shirtless holding a gun. That's something that will always be like, burned into our minds. But he really did inspire a lot of people to join this fight for freedom and to push back against government overreach. So I think that, for that, I'm very grateful.
All right, we're going to leave that there, and we are going to talk about some other news going on in the crypto space today. We are going to talk about Andreessen Horowitz, venture capital giant, announcing its third crypto venture fund. There had been a lot of speculation about how much they were going to be able to pull in. Initial reports said 1 billion, subsequent reports said 2 billion, citing sources. And now today, Thursday, they announced they brought in $2.2 billion from a bevy of investors to make bets on the next generation of crypto startups. I'm going to throw this to Will. This is a big one on the deal flow front. A16Z, obviously a major backer of Coinbase and countless others in the crypto space. 2.2 billion represents the ability to invest in a lot of startups going forward. What's your immediate take on the A16Z crypto fund?
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on this one. So just kind of zooming out, just seeing like the amount of cash that people place into A16Z's hands to make investments on behalf of them is just wild and startling. Like that is a lot of money. And I don't know exactly who invested in them to get that money into further investors' hands. And I don't know if it came from A16Z itself, like some part of it, but interesting to see that there's still an appetite for investing in crypto right now. And that number and that valuation just got a lot bigger over the time that people were reporting about it. Of course, people knew that A16Z was working through another round here. So yeah, a lot of dry powder, as they say, which is of itself interesting. I'm interested to see where this money flows into. There is a lot of key players out there, which I could see getting their hands on this. And then just kind of looking back at some of A16Z's like prior investments that really turned out well. Of course, the one that's like the biggest this year is Coinbase, where they really cleaned up on that investment. And I'm sure that didn't hurt when they were pitching this newest round to other people. So overall, like huge round, very bullish for the space going forward, even if we do kind of recede into a bear market for a little bit. But Zack, I want to hear your take. You were the author for this piece. What was it like talking with A16Z? Did they reach out for comment?
They notoriously like to go direct in terms of getting their news out into the world, so I did not speak with them on this instance. I've spoken with them before. It's really interesting to see the team that they're bringing on included in this announcement. There was some additional advisory hires that were announced. Probably the one that stood out to me was Bill Hinman, who's a former Securities and Exchange Commission official, famously sort of the guy who was like, yeah, Ethereum is Ether is a commodity, not a security. So he's sort of bringing that regulatory perspective to the work that A16Z is going to be doing. doing. Just another some interesting hires, and they mentioned as crypto goes mainstream, there's been some misunderstandings, and we're sort of out to correct some of those misunderstandings. So they mentioned that they're bringing on some heavyweights to help do some of that work. So it's going to be interesting to see. I think obviously with this much capital, it's going to be interesting to see how A16Z retains its lead as a major investor in this space, right? They've got bets on a lot of companies in this space, and I think with 2.2 billion in dry powder, they're going to be able to retain that pole position when it comes to investing in crypto startups. I guess I'll throw this to Jen. Jen, I know when we've seen these rounds. We have not seen a round of this size. We saw 300 million from Blockchain Capital. We saw a number of other rounds sort of in the 3-digit millions, but this is a big one. What does this say to you when you see A16Z coming out with a big splashy number?
Well, that was a crazy number for me to see this morning when I was going through the stories. Like $2.2 billion it's insane to think about, because we talk about how maybe the crypto markets are slowing down. Maybe people are starting to get tired of things like NFTs, and there's still so much money being poured into crypto. So, I mean, what stuck out for me from this story was that they're bringing heavy hitters together from multiple different industries to get crypto in front of the mainstream audience. And it made me think about this question. I'm sure I've asked you guys on this panel before, and Zack, I'll just throw it right back to you. What do you think the next big splash in crypto is? I mean, we saw NFTs kind of take over the first 6 months of this year. Where do you think this money is going to go? I know I'm always asking you for predictions, and I'm sorry for that.
Let's do it. I'm ready to roll out the crystal ball in this one. I think DAOs are starting to see a lot of interesting momentum. I don't know if A16Z would necessarily be involved in something like that, but I think there is some momentum around DAOs, or decentralized autonomous organizations, basically sort of like shared bank accounts on the internet where people can invest in projects that they deem important, worthy, or potentially having great upside. So DAOs, I think, maybe is something interesting. I think like A16Z with this money, it's probably going to be pushing forward this like crypto abstracted behind convenient front ends, right? So like I could imagine them making bets on projects that tap into various protocols, but to the mainstream user, they aren't necessarily a crypto product. Like we've seen that with like Eco and other things that have raised a lot of venture capital. So I don't know. I'm curious to see where this money goes over the next few years. Their last fund, which they announced in early 2020, had 515 million, I think was the figure. So the fact that they 4x that and are going to be able to spread a bunch of bets across the landscape is quite interesting to me, at least. It's a whole lot of money. Hopefully those LPs are happy at the end of the day. All right, we're going to take a break. I think when we get back, we're going to talk about this Hong Kong news site that got shut down. It seems to be having a second life on the blockchain and potentially interesting development. So we'll talk about that after the break. Stick with us. It's The Hash. Thanks.
CoinDesk indexes, the market standard for crypto assets since 2014. Our trusted data powers billions in publicly traded funds. CoinDesk indexes are the standard used by institutions, and they're the key for investors looking to understand and access crypto markets.
CoinDesk Bitcoin Price Index, XBX, has been instrumental to Grayscale, enabling investors around the world to access Bitcoin through a regulated, familiar product.
CoinDesk indexes enabled the early adopters to build crypto investment vehicles, and they're already trusted by a new generation of global investors.
Welcome back to The Hash, everyone. We are opening up this block by talking about a scandal coming out of South Africa. So a South African crypto investment firm has apparently shut down. Founders have absconded with a ton of money. So I'll lay out a bit of history of how this story started. Mid-April, AfriCrypt's investors were sent an email claiming that the platform was shutting down, freezing all accounts following a hack that compromised clients' accounts. And so investors were at that time apparently encouraged not to ask law enforcement said that it will slow down the recovery process. But then soon after this apparent hack, the AfriCrypt founders allegedly transferred the pooled investor funds from accounts across Europe, and they froze accounts. And then apparently the website was shuttered. They won't return investor calls. This could rank as one of the largest crypto cons in history. So I'm going to throw this to the group. Ben, I'm going to throw it to you to start. What are your thoughts on what's going on here? Because this is $3.6 billion in Bitcoin that's now missing.
Yeah, this is like, big Quadriga CX vibes, but 100 times. Like, this is so big. And just the nature of it too kind of follows all the different lines of skepticism that we've come to expect when there's exit scams or things like that in regards to these companies. What I found kind of interesting here, I mean, not only do you have out of this fund and have kind of absconded with this money, but there was a note that they passed all of these funds through multiple Bitcoin mixers. So when I started hearing about that, and they said the law enforcement or the authorities, or maybe lawyers, I believe, were saying that it's kind of going to be untraceable in some way. So I'm waiting for one of our blockchain sleuthing companies to ride in here on a white horse and say, no, we can get this Bitcoin even though it went through all these mixers. So how effective that is in concealing where these funds are going, I think is going to be really interesting to watch. And then also looking at what the enforcement actions are going to be like, considering they seem to have absconded to the UK. So those are some of the thoughts immediately on this, but this is a massive amount of money, and I think it will have a huge amount of fallout if these funds are not necessarily recovered.
For sure. Will, what's your take on all this?
Yeah, I have a few different thoughts. So I guess from the perspective of the people who are chasing these guys, looking for the funds, that is the warrant for investing in firms like Chainalysis. And then on the flip side, when you have the ability to launder these funds and break up the transaction history so you can't trace the Bitcoin, that is the rationale for building out that kind of software. Like if you are a dark hat hacker and you want, or black hat hacker and you want to kind of get those funds away, that's why you invest in those things like Samurai or Whirlpool. So interesting to see, this is how those softwares are developed, these huge hacks where people lose millions to billions of dollars. But yeah, just putting that in also in perspective of the larger crypto ecosystem, that's a lot of Bitcoin, first of all, and then compared to the Mt. Goxes of the world and the Quadrigas of the world, this is a huge hack. And it'll be interesting to see where the pressure comes down from. Is it going to be outside of South Africa, or is it going to be internal to South Africa? I'm sure that there's users from all over the world, even though that the exchange was located in South Africa. So yeah, definitely a huge story kind of flying under the radar today.
Jen, throw it to you.
Yeah, I'm thinking about these South African users, and I'm so upset for them. I mean, we talk about lack of trust in governments and financial systems, and I lived in South Africa as a journalist for 5 years, and that is the poster child for corrupt governments and a lack of trust in the police system. And so I think about these people who are looking for an alternative, and they found that in Bitcoin, and it just takes two bad actors to leave a sour taste in a lot of people's mouths and maybe turn people off of crypto in a place where they probably need it the most. But I'll throw this up to you, Zack, for your final thoughts. Or Ben. Ben's hand was up.
I'll do it quick and then I'll give it to Ben. I just wanted to remember Quadriga CX because it has been a minute since I thought about that, and that was just such a bizarre tale. But anyway, that's all I got. Ben, go.
No, I was just going to say, I think the South African aspect of this is really interesting. I too lived there, Jen, for a while, and sort of seeing the machinations and interactions between the different departments of police, and then also how they interacted with government and local politics is really fascinating. And particularly, looking at if they do call in sort of blockchain analytics companies, I've talked to those companies. They say they have internal standards about what governments they will or will not work with based upon things like civil liberties, based upon things like human rights abuses. And I think South Africa could present a really interesting case to examine just exactly what those look like, because they declined to talk to me about what those guidelines actually do. And I was thinking, when I was writing a story last year, it's only a matter of time before it gets into a gray area. So we'll see if this might be one of those. But again, this is just the beginning of what feels like another yarn in the kind of crypto criminality exit scam world.
For sure. And going back to what we spoke about earlier in this show about this predominance of DAOs happening at the moment, and also the move towards decentralization, this is a classic case of why that might be useful. When you have these exchanges, when you have these investment firms just run off with people's money, you start to realize that there is just significant counterparty risk. There is just significant risk of central point of failure in these institutions, which is why so many people are just so bullish on a decentralized future and pushing towards that. If we can take out that fallible human element, that corruptible human element, then maybe we can have a better world where people can trust math instead of people with their money, which is a very exciting prospect. So very, very excited to see that future start to unfold. But let's change track here. Going to talk about Huobi. So what have we got there?
Yeah, so the news out of China has not only been relegated to Bitcoin mining, but it's also been relegated to Bitcoin exchanges and the movement of crypto within the country itself, which to a degree is actually the larger story here. So it seems that China is cracking down all across the board. Of course, like throughout crypto's history, there's always been this notion of China FUD, where it's not really real news or new news coming out of China, coming around across crypto. But it seems at this time it is somewhat different. So Huobi, which is a China-based exchange, has now launched a U.S. affiliate, or is set to launch a U.S. affiliate next month as part of its transition out of China. Of course, Huobi is one of the larger exchanges in the space. They have an OTC desk, they mine, and they also have a pretty large stablecoin network. So significant development to see them finally leave China and then open up some affiliates in the US. At the same time, we also have Coinbase going east. So Coinbase has registered with the financial watchdog in Japan to be able to offer some crypto services in that country. Still seems like that's more in the earlier stages. They've been hiring throughout Japan, and they're kind of like working through some of the technical aspects of opening Coinbase Japan. But interesting to see kind of the West-East divide here kind of being breached by two companies that have some significantly deep pockets. Zach, what do you think about Huobi leaving China? What's the legacy here?
Didn't Huobi have a Huobi US for a minute, and then it like ran into some trouble and shut down? Is that right?
Yeah.
Can you like remind me of the backstory there? Because that was like just like it's all a dream. They were there for not long, but yeah, right. Help me out.
Yeah,
Will.
they were shut down, or they just had to leave in December of 2019. As part of Huobi Group, I think it was HBUS was the firm, just because of regulatory concerns. And that's the extent of my knowledge. I mean, operating in the US is also difficult. I mean, operating in China is illegal now, but in the US, you have to jump through basically 50 different state licenses and then federal licenses, and then you have to get chased by the SEC. So I wouldn't call it a great regulatory space either.
Good stuff. Well, yeah, Huobi is like really big. I mean, they're sort of like Binance Junior in a lot of the Asian markets. So the fact that they're doubling down on their efforts to do a U.S. affiliate, I think is quite notable. It'd be interesting to see what that traction looks like. Huobi, to me, yeah, I think that one is probably the one that stands out as really interesting. Binance US has tried to bring some of the juice from Binance into the US context, and they've sort of achieved that, sort of in fits and starts, but there does seem to be some tension between those two parts of that overarching brand. So I'd be curious to see if Huobi sort of learned its lessons from last time and was able to capture a significant market share in the West. Certainly one to watch.
Yeah, I'll jump in and just... Yeah, so I think that it makes a lot of sense for these companies to be opening branches and affiliates all over the world as a way of kind of decentralizing jurisdiction. Jurisdiction arbitrage, you could call it. It's a similar thing to what Binance has done, where they say, well, we don't really have a main office and we're kind of based everywhere in the world. When you are dealing with all these competing regulatory frameworks across the globe, when you have China cracking down, you have America doing their own kind of crackdown, and, it makes sense for these companies to say, well, we're a worldwide worldwide product. There are no barriers to people getting involved with Bitcoin. This is a global phenomenon. So it makes sense for them to be expanding and make sure that people across the globe can access this regardless of whatever draconian laws individual governments decide to enact. So definitely diversifying and not putting all your eggs in one basket in terms of location. It definitely seems like a great move for crypto, and what is really going to ensure that it as an idea can't be shut down, because that's always what people are saying about crypto. At the end of the day, you have different governance with different rules, and so you can't actually shut down something that is this global phenomenon, especially if it's, based everywhere. I think crypto companies are kind of, embracing that ethos themselves as well. But Ben, I'll throw it to you.
Yeah, I was just thinking about this kind of East meets West like exchange that's happening in terms of exchanges more generally. But I think, Huobi coming into the US is a really interesting idea. We have Binance, we have Coinbase, and I'm curious, we had Brian Brooks, the CEO of Binance US at Consensus, and he sort of laid out his propositions of like how Binance US is going to like try to capture more market share in terms of like partnerships with other companies and stuff like that, as well as improve customer service, obviously, which you've also reported on that being an issue. And so I'm curious about like, when Huobi comes here, like what are they going to be offering that draws people from like Binance or draws people from Coinbase? And I think like looking at this environment too, I mean, the competition is going to be interesting because it's going to be what is the unique value proposition, right? You can't just sort of like mimic what other places are doing where, it takes a lot of draw and gravity for somebody to like uproot themselves from one exchange and move to another. So that's what I'm going to be watching. But more generally, I think that more exchanges come into the US and more US exchanges going elsewhere is overall a good thing.
All right. Okay, so we are going from the West back to the East, and we're going to talk about Apple Daily again. So yesterday we chatted about Hong Kong's Apple Daily. They printed their last newspaper, were forced to shut down due to national security law crackdown. Now, cyber activists are uploading Apple Daily articles to a decentralized file storage platform, Arweave. So Ben, when I was reading this, I thought immediately I wanted to get your thoughts on this. Since yesterday we were kind of ideating on different blockchain use cases for this story, and here now we've seen that some programmers have taken it upon themselves to upload articles from Apple to a decentralized file storage platform. What were your initial thoughts?
Yeah, I think this is interesting. I think that this is, kind of life comes at you fast and developers are responding accordingly. I think there's maybe 4,000 files that are being uploaded to Arweave, which is more or less sort of a file storage system that is decentralized and therefore can't be shut down or removed. I think this is cool. I think this is important because I think it shows use cases beyond like just fintech or like number go up for blockchain itself. I'm trying to get in touch with the team behind this to talk to them a little bit more about it, because I have questions around like, are they going to continue to publish things via Arweave, or what we're going to be looking at that? Is the thing going to live on, or is this just sort of like at this point, and this is what it sounds like to me, a for posterity, let's make sure this information that was out there in the world is not just sort of like shuttered and deleted. So I think it's cool. I think that we might see more things like this happen as, governments start to crack down on freedom of the press in different ways as they continue to do so across the world. But Naomi, I want to toss this one up to you for your thoughts.
Yeah, so Ben, yesterday you brought up a really great point where we were talking about the draconian Chinese government and how they're cracking down on freedom of speech and how it's awful. And you brought up the point that, well, actually the US government does things as well. And we should also talk about that. Let's talk about all the bad things that all the governments do. And so it kind of, I wanted to touch on the fact that, Executive Director of Freedom of the Press Foundation, Trevor Tim, brought up all this censorship going on in Iran also in the last day. So he said, the US government unilaterally censoring websites on a global scale based on vague disinformation claims. We can be assured that this power definitely won't be abused or copied or backfire. Just brings up such a great point when you see the crackdown in Hong Kong against freedom of the speech, but then you see the US government seizing dozens of website domains that are connected to Iran, saying that they're linked to disinformation efforts. I mean, that's sort of, phrasing. It really sends shivers down my spine that we have this global police for disinformation now. It's like such an Orwellian nightmare. But I did want to bring that up just in relation to what you were saying yesterday, because I just think it's such a good point, and us to keep in mind all of the crushing of freedom of speech and freedom of press happening around the world right now, and maybe point to the fact that we can use technology as a way to push back against this. We can use things like Arweave. We can use blockchain technology as a way of enabling our freedom of speech and decentralizing trust and all of that. So So it's a scary time to be alive, but also an exciting time because we do have the technical power to push back against this.
There was another developer cited in the article developing something called Litecoin. So the idea behind Litecoin is that when creators or journalists publish something online, they can create a record of it on the blockchain that obviously we can go in and see if anyone has tried to change it and track it throughout its life online. Zack, do you think that this could be the future of journalism?
I think desk is the future of journalism. So Jenna from desk. Jenna from desk, can we get a desk drop in the chat, please? Oh, damn it, that's not happening anymore.
Are we bringing desk back? I'm sorry. We need to divert for 1 second. Is desk coming back ever?
I know nothing.
To CoinDesk
about that. I have no desk. I have no desk alpha to leak. Sorry. I don't know about the coin stuff. I mean, we saw that with like Civil whenever they tried to do that, and it sort of like captured the imagination of media critics everywhere, and then never went anywhere. So I'm like pretty bearish on that. I think props to the Arweave team, whoever jumped on this. I think it's nice. It's nice to like recognize an opportunity to demonstrate the value of decentralized file storage, and credit to them for acting quickly in a decentralized or in a concerted fashion. It'd be nice to see if sort of these episodes led to continued innovation on this front. Sometimes I feel like these are kind of those flash in the pan moments. If it's like, I think we saw with like, even unrest in the US, like when Gab gets deplatformed and other people rush to be like, hey, we're doing this on the blockchain. We're going to do this in a way that's censorship resistant. And then you kind of like don't hear about it after that. So I'd be curious to see if this found its legs and was able to be an ongoing experiment for this. They like to call Arweave, it's like it's decentralized library of Alexandria that will live on forever through various technical mechanisms. So if this were to actually be a use case that brought people into those networks, I think that would be pretty cool. But I will withhold judgment to see if this is just a flash in the pan or if this actually has some staying power.
Yeah, and I think it's more what I'm seeing, and with Arweave in particular, is like they do seem sort of like one-off instances of trying to document this rather than like a continued addition over time, of continuing to write these things. I'm thinking back to a story I was looking at earlier this year around the Permanent Archives, which is another Arweave project that was essentially taking raw Twitter, Reddit, and Facebook video footage and photos of the January 6th insurrection on the Capitol that people were posting of themselves to these social media and documenting those for posterity, because those were quickly being deleted as people were realizing what they were doing was in fact illegal, and there was a lot of repercussions that were going to come out of that. So again, though, that I don't think that project has been posting since January. So that again seems like a one-off. And it's okay if these one-offs happen. I think there is value to capturing all this information, but I do think to have a sustained project that's actively adding stuff over the course of time is where you get real purchase with these sorts of projects. So that's, again, Zack, I think that's a good point.
Good stuff, guys. Well, thanks for doing the show with us today. We're going to wrap it here. It's been the Hash. It's been the Thursday show. We've got the Friday show coming up tomorrow, I'm told. That'll be fun. Thanks for sticking with us. I'm Zack. We got Naomi. We got Ben. We got Will. We got Jen. We're the Hash. We'll be back. Stick with us on CoinDesk TV for all about Bitcoin at 3 p.m. Eastern. And until then, you have a great day. Thanks.
Bye.